Okay, shall I start? Okay. Ada height chesena? Okay. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. And it's my privilege to be on this platform of GPAT online class for BPharm students. And today is the pharmaceutical analysis part 3. And this is Dr. P. Ramalingam from Raghavendra Institute of Pharmaceutical Education Research, affiliated to JNT University, Anandapur, Andhra Pradesh. For today's class, I'll be dealing about NMR spectroscopy and mass spectroscopy. I'll be focusing more on fundamentals rather than instrumentation. As usual, it's a disclaimer message. The contents in the presentation are compiled from different sources. This presentation is delivered at the interest of students and not involved in any commercial benefits. Thus, the presenter shall not claim any copyright for this presentation and not responsible for any copyright issues if arise. Let us enter into the topic. It's NMR spectroscopy. And every one of you are aware that what is NMR? NMR means nuclear magnetic resonance spectroscopy. So this spectroscopy is based on the absorption of radio frequency by the spinning nuclei. This is point number one is very important. When your molecule is exposed to a radio frequency under the magnetic field, molecule is comprised of several atoms. Atom means inside nuclei, outside we have electrons. So here we are speaking about the spinning nuclei, which the nuclei means which consists of the proton and neutron. So that nuclei, the spinning nuclei will absorb radio frequency under the magnetic field. The question is here, and you cannot expect all the nuclei to absorb radio frequency. Only the spinning nuclei, especially the spin quantum number of your nuclei, and should not be is equal to 0. So it means if a nuclei possess spin quantum number is equal to 0, it indicates the nuclei does not possess any spin. So when it not possess any spin, there is no magnetic property for the nuclei. So here it's a chapter name itself, it's called as magnetic resonance. The magnetic resonance nothing but the nuclei as well as radio frequency has its own magnetic property. So here when the nuclei of your sample as well as radio frequency, when they become magnetically equivalent, then the radio frequency is absorbed by a nuclei. That's why we called as nuclear magnetic resonance. It means when the nuclei of your sample, the nuclei of the atom become magnetically resonant to the radio frequency, then the radio frequency is absorbed by a nuclei. So hence, and especially when you go for examples like C12 and O16, so these nuclei, their spin quantum number is equal to 0. It means these nuclei do not possess any spin and it may not absorb radio frequency. And in general, for nuclei, for example, how to conclude which nuclei is spin quantum number is equal to 0 and which nuclei spin quantum number is not is equal to 0, and if any nuclei, and if atomic number and atomic weight. So if both atomic number and atomic weight are even, then the spin quantum number is equal to 0. That is the reason when you go for C12, so in case of C12, and atomic number is 6, atomic weight is 12, both are even. So in this case, this do not absorb any radio frequency. But when you come for C13, and it absorbs radio frequency. Next, when you come for NMR spectroscopy, more focusedly, I'll be focusing on H1 NMR spectroscopy. And remember, the H1 NMR spectroscopy means we are dealing about the proton nuclei. So the absorption of radio frequency by the proton. That's why we called as H1 NMR spectroscopy. So here, this proton NMR also called as hydrogen NMR or H1 NMR, and it's type of nuclear magnetic resonance spectroscopy, and which represent the hydrogen. I mean hydrogen nothing but especially it's H1 isotope. Hydrogen isotope we have three. One is a proton and deuterium and tritium. So here we are dealing only about proton. And so here, when you conduct a NMR experiment for proton nuclei, so whatever the NMR spectra you get, that represent only about the information on proton of the sample. The same way, when you come for carbon 13 NMR, you say it's a carbon 13 NMR, and here the C13 nuclei observe radio frequency, and the particular carbon 13 NMR that gives information only about the carbon in the chemical structure. So hence we may ask why we don't have other NMR, H2 NMR, deuterium NMR, and tritium NMR. We just see as per isotope abundance, naturally 99.999% will be proton, and remaining is 0.001 fraction only is together deuterium and tritium. So obviously any sample you take, the natural abundance of this deuterium and tritium in the any chemical sample, it is 0.01 percentage. That is not sufficient for the enough to produce enough sensitivity to observe radio frequency. So now let us come for the a question: how to predict the nuclei spin quantum number? Because when you go for a periodic table, there are more than 118 atoms, and we should know nothing but how to predict which nuclei can observe radio frequency, or which nuclei possess spin quantum number 0, which is not possess spin quantum number 0. So in this case, and you have to consider only the mass number and atomic number. The mass number is nothing but atomic weight. So here, and let us take the first case. If your atomic weight or mass number is odd, atomic number is odd or even, so automatically the spin quantum number will be in decimal. I mean it's 1 by 2 or 3 by 2 or 5 by 2. So they are called as off integral, because off integral nothing but they are all off integral. The best examples are proton, C13 and N15. So these all the three nuclei possess spin quantum number is equal to 1 by 2. When you come for O17, and its spin quantum number is 5 by 2. So it's a decimal. So that we called as these nuclei are called as off integral. And next case, if your mass number atomic weight is even and atomic number is odd, then the nuclei spin quantum number is integral. The values I is equal to 1, 2, 3, 4 is integral value, the no decimal. So example is deuterium and N14, and their spin quantum number is 1. And the same way, the last category, when you go for a mass number or atomic number, both are even, then the nuclei spin quantum number is 0. The example is carbon 12, O16, yes, 32. It means they are NMR inactive. Whereas the first two case, like above two category, they are NMR active. It means NMR inactive means they don't observe radio frequency. That's the case. So here, one thing what you want to derive from this table, nothing but we just see for a nuclei, for eligibility, or for a nuclei to observe NMR, to observe radio frequency, or a nuclei for a nuclei to be eligible to conduct NMR spectroscopy, and either mass number or atomic number should be odd, or both should be odd. So here this odd mass number or odd atomic number is must for a nuclei to observe radio frequency. The principle of radio frequency, nothing but absorption, radio frequency absorption by nuclei. So any spinning nuclei. So here by default, when I say any spinning nuclei, the spin quantum number is more than 0. I mean the spin quantum number is not is equal to 0. And this any spinning nuclei will have different energy level under the external field. I mean here under the external field means magnetic field. The energy level of the particular nuclei. So here is a kind of your experiment, and you have to consider the nuclei also a magnet, and the magnet is exposed to another magnetic field. So you have to consider the nuclei itself a magnet, because of spinning. When any spinning object it produces a magnetic field, so that the nuclei has to be considered as a magnet. So when the particular nuclei is exposed to a external magnetic field, there will be orientation. When your childhood you might have played two magnet, and you just keep it like north and south, same pole repulse each other, opposite pole attract each other. nature. So nothing but like attraction, repulsion. These are nothing but two different energy level. So attraction is one energy level and repulsion another energy level. Same way here also when a nuclei, that particular small nuclei is just consider a small magnet, when it's exposed to the external magnetic field, and they'll have energy level. So that number of energy level in the external magnetic field, it depends on the spin quantum number. So for example, both proton and C13 and possess spin quantum number, it's a half integral. Half integral means I is equal to 1 by 2. But whereas deuterium possesses integral. So here I just wanted to see, and proton and carbon, they are different nuclei, but they possess same spin quantum number. But proton and deuterium, the same atom, and their spin quantum number is different. Proton is half and deuterium is 1. It means the spin quantum number it is not atom specific, it is isotope specific. Within the atom, different isotope will have different spin quantum number. That's what you ought to understand. Proton H1 possesses I is equal to half, whereas H2 possesses what is it? I is equal to 1. But here, interestingly, you can see that carbon and proton, carbon 13 and proton, they possess half integral I is equal to 1. So hence, the number of energy level for both proton and C13 nuclei under the magnetic field will be like the formula is 2I plus 1. So I is equal to spin quantum number. So you can go 2 into half plus 1 is equal to 2. So there's nothing but it means there is a two possible energy level in the under the external magnetic field. That's what we have, plus 1 by 2 and minus 1 by 2, plus of and minus of. One is a plus spin and minus is opposite. Both are opposite spin. So now the plus of and minus of respectively for higher energy. I mean, especially out of these two, and plus of is higher energy level and minus of is lower energy level. So generally we call it as it's higher energy orientation and lower energy orientation under the magnetic field. It means how you are going to define is when a nuclei is there, and how you are going to say it's a higher energy orientation and lower energy orientation. And you just see here, and this is the nuclei where it is spinning, and when no field, when the external magnetic field applied, when the magnetic field is applied, automatically you can see that this nuclei is it's spinning in the is spinning in this direction. I mean, just think of its anti-clockwise direction, and this is spinning in the other. You can see is upward and it's a downward. So actually, spin direction is totally different. So this is spinning this way and this spinning this way. So here, this arrow mark is nothing but it's a kind of your magnetic field directions, and here is the magnetic field is downward. So here, in case of these nuclei, the nuclei which are the lower energy level, we call it as minus off, and this direction of the magnetic field of the nuclei and the direction of the magnetic field of the applied magnetic field, both are same direction. It means aligned. The same way when you come for this, and this opposite side. So the magnetic field of the external magnetic field and direction of the magnetic field of the nuclei, both are opposite, so it's opposed. So it is aligned, it's opposed, it's minus of, it's plus of. So these are the two energy level. So either low energy level orientation, it's a higher energy orientation. Under this condition only, what we are going, nothing but we are going to apply radio frequency. When the radio frequency is applied, and the nuclei which are in the low energy level minus of will observe radio frequency, it undergo flip. The flip nothing but the same that of your transition or excitation in UV spectroscopy. So the flip nothing but see this magnetic field direction, it's changed into upward to what is a downward. I mean, in the ground state, the magnetic field of the nuclei is aligned with the magnetic applied magnetic field. But in case of your higher energy level, the magnetic field direction of your nuclei is opposed the applied magnetic field. So the kind of change in the magnetic field direction, the spin change, we call it as a kind of spin change, it's called as flip. So here, and that's what here the lower energy state, nothing but the magnetic field is aligned with the applied field. That's what we discussed now. So this is what you can see the behavior of the nuclei in the applied magnetic field. So here, when the magnetic field is applied, you can see this is the direction of the magnetic This is the direction of the applied magnetic field. It is a spinning nuclei. So here the magnetic field is up. You can see up when it is directions. So when it is spinning, it produces a orbit here. It's called as precessional orbit. It's called the precessional orbit. The frequency of this spinning is called as precessional frequency. The frequency of the spinning is called as what is the precessional frequency. That frequency will differ from atom to atom or the nuclei to nuclei. It's all depends on the environment. Once I am repeating, and the spinning of the nuclei, this is called as spinning of the nuclei under the magnetic field. So this spinning frequency depends on the nuclei or atom environment. So here, when there is a change in the angle, automatically the precessional orbit also changes. So automatically the energy also changes. So here, the angle between this applied magnetic field and the angle between this spinning axis, that is the angle. That's called as angular momentum. Generally, if you consider, usually the angular momentum is correlated with the spinning axis and the gravitational axis. But here, if you consider that is the angle, so this angle will differ from nuclei to nuclei. Accordingly, the energy level also will change. So now, let us come for this kind of equation. Generally, we call it as fundamental NMR equation. It is also called as Larmor equations. So here, that particular, as I told you, the precessional frequency, or we called as the frequency of the external radiation, or you can call it as the amount of the radio frequency that required to induce transition. I mean, the how much energy in the form of radio frequency is required to flip a nuclei from the low energy to high energy. I mean to transit from minus off to plus off. So nu is equal to gamma by 2 pi into V naught. So this equation speaks a lot. So the gamma is nothing but gyromagnetic ratio. This gyromagnetic ratio only I said this gyromagnetic ratio purely depends on the orbit size and this angle, the spinning axis angle, everything determined. So this is the gyromagnetic ratio depends on the environment. The same way B naught is equal to strength of the external magnetic field. So here what happened? So this if you consider this is the frequency. So obviously, and this frequency or the Larmor frequency or the frequency required to transit a nuclei from low energy to high energy, it's purely depends on directly proportional to the external magnetic field. So now the magnetic momentum, usually the mu, that I told you the direction of the magnetic momentum, upward and downward. So the magnetic momentum mu is proportional to the spin quantum number. That's what the equation you should understand. The mu is equal to gamma I into h by 2 pi. So here gamma is equal to magnetogyric ratio or gyromagnetic ratio, both are same. Magnetogyric ratio or gyromagnetic ratio, both are same. So gamma is equal to magnetogyric ratio is equal to magnetic moment by angular momentum. That's what I said, the angular momentum. It is purely depends on the angular momentum. So here, that's why here gamma is different for each nuclei, and it's a constant. It's a constant. For example, proton will have different, and carbon will have different. Once again, the particular proton depends on the environment will have different. For example, we have methanol. You take CH3OH methanol molecule, and that CH3 proton will have different gamma value, and OH proton will have different gamma value. So is the high is allowed only certain value of these values can. So usually that ranges from m1 is equal to minus I to plus I. So that is leave it. So another proton, and the simple spin quantum number is equal to 1 by 2. So only two values ml. That's what I said. So minus I to plus I nothing but plus up to minus up. This is we have dealt in the other formula 2I plus 1 formula. And what is this Larmor frequency or precessional frequency? So this Larmor frequency or the precessional frequency of the nuclei is depends on the applied magnetic field and the environment of the nuclei. So here the same equation, the Larmor frequency nu is equal to gamma B naught by 2 pi. So here, for example, if your the frequency is 60 megahertz, the magnetic field for external magnetic field should be 14,092 Gauss. So here, why I mentioned this sentence, nothing but to understand the unit for the magnetic field. The external magnetic field unit is Gauss, and the unit for the radio frequency is megahertz. What is used in the NMR? So gamma is equal to magnetic Garrick ratio. So remember, and the unit for this magnetic Garrick ratio is radians by Gauss. And so finally, that is already you know that what is that gamma? Gamma is equal to 2 pi mu by HI. So here that last equation very important, and once it was asked in your examination also. Magneto-Gyric ratio and spin quantum number, the relationship. You remember, magnetic momentum is directly proportional to magneto-Gyric ratio, whereas spin quantum number is inversely proportional to magneto-Gyric ratio. That's what the relationship you have to understand. So now the gyromagnetic ratio and a nuclear Larmor frequency. So as I told you, the gyromagnetic ratio differs from nuclear to nuclei and depends on the environment. This is already stressed so many times in the last slide. And for example, you take methanol CH3OH. The environment of methyl proton and OH proton are different. Hence, they are magnetically not equivalent and absorb radio frequency at different energy and different signal. That's what the conclusion here. So when a gyromagnetic ratio is different for a proton, so when it will be different, when the proton environment is different, automatically gyromagnetic ratio also different. So when the gyromagnetic ratio is different, it's called as magnetically not equivalent. When the magnetic not equivalent, energy wise not equivalent, automatically it require different energy state to observe the radio frequency. So RF absorption by nuclei, it's very simple and more commonly, remember as on today, the NMR instrument, they use the radio frequency from 60 to 600, but as on now, and 60, 90, 100 are not used. Now they are using 300, 400, 600, even till 800 megahertz. So here, what is the role of this radio frequency and the instrument? Nothing but as the radio frequency increases in the instrument, the resolution also increases and the sensitivity also very increases. So here, and I mean, the NMR instrument working at 600 megahertz, it's more sensitive than the NMR instrument which is working at 300 megahertz. And here, when this radiation, when the applied radio frequency is absorbed by a molecule, is when the precision frequency, I mean the Larmor frequency, is equal to applied radio frequency. So here, the precision frequency, I told you that like a diagram which is rotating, and so that precision frequency of the nuclei in the magnetic field, when the particular frequency is matching or equal to the applied radio frequency, so by default, the nuclei will take up or absorb this applied radio frequency, then undergo flipping. I mean, the nuclei will undergo spin change. So from the low energy to high energy, the spin changing, but as I shown the diagram here, so it's the magnetic moment is towards up. After see here, this is spinning this way towards spinning this direction. When the flip, nothing but instead of spinning, the nucleus spin this way, automatically magnetic moment. So this is not as alpha spin, nothing but it's a ground state, it's a kind of excited state, or it's a minus off, it's a plus off. So next is this angle. As I told you, the angular momentum differs based on the environment. So change in the gyromagnetic ratio and energy level. So here, and ultimate this is of NMR spectrum. You can see the NMR spectrum is a methanol spectrum, and here you can see methyl group, and here it's OH. So this signal is methyl. This particular all three proton together given this signal, the NMR signal, and this is the signal for the proton. So here the number of signal indicate the number of different chemical environment of the molecule. So it means this particular NMR is only the proton NMR. So whatever the signal you get, it's all because of proton only. Whatever signal you get, all because of what is a proton only. It is not because of any other nuclei, only because of proton. So here, if you see, this signal is from these three. This is from OH. The reason nothing but this all the three proton having the environment of carbon electropositive atom. The environment is different, and this proton as environment of oxygen, it is electronegative atom. So though these all are proton, that environment is totally different. So they differed in the environment, so that there is a change in the gyromagnetic ratio. So automatically they absorbed radio frequency at different energy level. That's why here we that's why that the sentence is justified in the example form with the methanol molecule. The same way come for example of ethanol. So in ethanol, CH3, CH3, CH2OH. It means there are three different types of proton in the ethanol here. See here, CH3 is one kind, and CH2 is another type. OH is another type. So CH3 this signal, and CH2 this signal, and OH is what is the other signal. So here, that's what here overall what we can conclude nothing but number of NMR signal you get in NMR instrument is equal to number of or type of proton present in the chemical structure. So now let us come for chemical shift. So what is this chemical shift? So here the chemical shift is nothing but it's a kind of shift of this. You're seeing this here. You can see here. It's a TMS called as internal standard here. Internal standard nothing but internal standard used to calibrate the NMR scale. So here CH3 appeared close to TMS. CH2 appeared little away from TMS. OH is appeared still away from the TMS. So it's a kind of shift. See, it's a TMS 0, and the CH3 shifted this way, and CH2 shifted still far away from TMS. OH shifted still far away from TMS. So this shift is called as chemical shift. This shift is called as chemical shift. So here, when you take an NMR spectrum for the molecule, we have depends on the type of environment and depends on the type of nuclei in the particular chemical structure, and the number of signals you can find in NMR spectra. But the position of these NMR spectra for each atom will be sometimes the signal will be close to TMS, sometimes the signals may be away from TMS. So that shift is called as chemical shift. So here the reason nothing but why they shift nothing but it's all depends upon the electronic environment. Remember the chemical shift is the shift of the signals from the TMS is purely because of the electronic environment. And when they differ in electronic environment, it means they differ in gyromagnetic ratio and they absorb radio frequency at a different applied field strength. So when a molecule is placed in a magnetic field, its electrons are caused to circulate and thus they produce secondary magnetic field. So nothing but induced magnetic field. So here, as I told you, nothing but and the whenever you go for NMR spectroscopy, there are two magnetic field involved. That one is the magnetic field which is produced by the nuclei itself. I mean our own nuclei itself. Another is the nuclei. Another is the magnetic field produced by the external field. So these two orientation is playing a major role in case of your NMR principle. In addition, what happened? The electronic environment also produce some kind of magnetic field. So that is generally called a screening constant. So that screening constant also will affect your chemical shift. So here to define the chemical shift is defined as the difference in the part per million. The unit of chemical shift is part per million. Remember it. And it is between the resonant frequency of the observed proton and tetramethylsilane. So tetramethylsilane hydrogens, I think, but it's called as the internal standard. The tetramethylsilane is the internal standard used to calibrate the NMR scale. So TMS is the most common reference compound in the NMR. So usually in the NMR spectra, it is set at 0 ppm. So whatever so if you take NMR spectrum, always you will find your in the current NMR instrument the high resolutions people are not using any TMS, and still you just see that whatever if you find any signal at the 0 ppm, that is not because of the test proton, it is because of the internal standard. So here there is a formula for the chemical minus the frequency of the signal minus frequency of reference by spectrometer frequency in 10 to the power of 6. The 10 to the power of 6 per parts per million. Excuse me. One minute. Okay. Okay. So formula for chemical shift. So here the delta sample is equal to same, the formula is repeating. It's like a frequency of sample minus frequency of reference divided by the frequency of spinning frequency of this reference in 10 to the power of 6. And we also have other formulas like chemical shift is equal to chemical shift of test proton minus chemical shift of TMS. So you know the thing, but chemical shift of TMS 0. So here and in any, for example, come here and let us take this how to calculate chemical shift for CH2. And let us take this chemical shift of CH2, the value is around 3.5. So the chemical shift is about 3.5 minus 0. So this is a convenient, that is the reason why the TMS made 0. It's very easy for us to calculate the chemical shift for any signal. So now I think, but the actual formula is that is position of the test proton in delta value minus position of the TMS. So by default TMS 0, like 3.5 minus 0 is equal to 3.5. Same way when you come for OH chemical shift, it's a 4.8 for example, the position of OH. So now 4.8 minus 0 is equal to 4.8. This is the way how we calculate. And we also have other scale, not only delta scale, it's called a tau scale. So the tau scale is nothing but this formula very important. It's a 10 minus delta value. That's very important. Like tau scale is 10 minus delta value. Sometime in examination they'll give you if the delta value is 3. What is the tau value? Something but 10 minus 3. It's a 7. So that is formula very important. And the other chemical shift, it is also calculation sometime asked. And what is that chemical shift delta ppm is equal to shift of proton in hertz divided by instrumental frequency in megahertz. Remember, the precessional frequency unit is hertz and the instrumental frequency is megahertz. So here sometimes they'll give you the precessional frequency of the proton in the particular instrument in the hertz. The instrumental frequency is around 300 megahertz, and you have to calculate. So now the chemical shift is equal to, that is a precessional frequency, or is called as shift of proton in hertz divided by instrument frequency in megahertz. So accordingly, if you go for the scale, like this chemical shift value, the x-axis of the particular NMR spectrum. So you can start from the 0 to more commonly the delta value for the chemical shift delta ppm 0 to maximum 15. Now you can see up to 12. Now you see from 0 to here, and it's our alkane CH, CH, all the saturated compound here, CH3, CH2, CH, all the case. And this region, next region comes for the some electronegative atom attached to elements like OCH3, SCH3, like or the alkene, all those will come into the picture. And next goes this entire region, almost like a 5 to this region is OH and NH. And you can see this is a kind of aromatic region. This is a complete aromatic region. Aromatic 7 to 8 is aromatic hydrogens, and this alkene, it's alkyne. And when you come for this is aldehyde, is for acid. So here what you can see, nothing but the shift is called a shifting. You just see as a proton environment is with electronegative. So if your proton is environment is electronegative, or your proton environment is more of unsaturation, the value is moving away. So here you see, here it's sp3 hybridized. There is no electronegative elements here. So the values are very close to TMS. Here, once if you start introducing a double bond or triple bond or electronegative element, it's all moving this side. And we come for X halogen. Halogen is still highly electronegative. That's why still further you can see the value is shifted over here. And next is alkyne. It's a double bond. It's unsaturation. Benzene is also delocalization. So we have this electronic effect. And last here, if you come here, this aldehyde and acid, or see, in case of acid and all, your proton is exposed to two electronegative element as well as unsaturations. so that it's completely shifted towards a higher delta value, and this is called as de-shielding. When a proton position is moving away from TMS, it's called as de-shielding. When a proton position is moving towards TMS, called as shielding. So now these are shielded. So these protons are shielded, and these protons are what is de-shielded. When compared to these two, this is shielded, this is de-shielded. So now the measurement of chemical shift. The measurement of chemical shift. So in order to measure the magnitude of chemical shift of a different kinds of protons, and we require a standard signal. That's what we have used 0.5% tetramethylsilane, and this used as a reference compound or standard compound, as already mentioned and added that this is the agent used in the calibration or normalization of the NMR spectrum. So this particular chemical shift is represented delta ppm, as you know, it's called delta scale. So we try to set this TMS signal as 0, so that is easy for us to calculate the chemical shift of test protons. So let us come for the other internal standard which are used here. So the more commonly used internal standard is tetramethylsilane sulfonate, for example. But this is water insoluble. It's water insoluble. So it's a small mistake in that. Just I'll not saline sulfonate, so tetramethylsilane. Now just wait. Yes, this tetramethylsilane. It's a water insoluble. So here the limitation of this particular tetramethylsilane water insoluble. We use like a water. Water means we don't use water as a solvent. We use deuterated solvent in NMR. So any solvent we use in NMR spectroscopy, they are not a proton containing solvent. They are free from proton. They called as deuterated solvent. It's called as deuterated solvent. So here there is one more agent. I mean, the internal standard or reference standard can be used in NMR spectroscopy. It's called as sodium 3-trimethyl silyl propane sulfonate, and this is a water soluble compound. It's more conveniently used for NMR spectroscopy if you conduct your experiment in water. Other than that, you can also see there is a quantity to NMR. It's a lot of development the quantity to NMR. In that, sometimes they use malic acid, dimethyl sulfones, 1,4-BTM D4 and DSS D6, and they're also considered as an internal standard in quantitative NMR. It is just for your knowledge. So here, once again, here as I discussed in the earlier slide, so this is 0 ppm, and where we consider TMS standard, and this is 10 to, if you go this way, if you go this up 1 to 12, this is called as delta scale, and down is tau scale. I told you 10 minus. So here is very important. In delta scale, the position of the TMS is 0 delta. If you use tau scale, the position of the TM is 10. That's why the formula for chemical shift is tau scale is equal to 10 minus delta. Okay, so here you just see any proton which is appearing close to TMS, that is shielded. Any proton appearing away from TMS is de-shielded. As I told, de-shielded because of the electronegative element as well as unsaturation. So any proton or any nuclei which are close to electronegative atom, or which are near to or close to the unsaturation, and that atom will experience de-shielding. And now, very simple. It's an example that an isolated proton, for example, the proton is isolated, and so now the nucleus is there, and the particular nucleus will experience only applied magnetic field. B not nothing but applied magnetic. Now the shielding means what? What is happening shielding here? So here what's happening? When your proton is surrounded by electron density, when a proton is, as I told you that when a proton is close to the electronegative element. So when you go for electronegative element is nearby, like you take a proton of OH. So the hydrogen is attached to the proton, and I don't think but proton. The proton is attached to oxygen. So the oxygen consists of two lone pair of electron. So that is having that lone pair of atom intensity. Or else, what are the case? Okay. So, for example, I'm telling. So in such a case, when your proton is when a proton is surrounded by electron density, in such a case, because of the electron density, so there is a magnetic field produced or magnetic field induced by the electron inside the nucleus. So this is called as induced magnetic field. So by default, what happens? This induced magnetic field sometimes this opposes the applied magnetic field. In such a case, this nucleus is called as shielded. Sometime in reverse case, as I told in OH, as I told you what is OH, the magnetic field produced by the electron density of the atom will reinforce the magnetic field directions. In such a case, called as de-shielded. Called as de-shielded. So here it is opposing. If it is opposed the magnetic field, it's called so opposed but protection. That's why called as shielded. And when it's not protected, it's called as de-shielded. So here the electronegativity and inductive effect. So let us say now, and this is a CH which attached chlorine, let us say chloroform. In the chloroform, a carbon is there, carbon attached to the chlorine atoms, and we have a hydrogen here, proton here. So in such a case, as what's happening is, and because of the high electronegative nature of chlorine, all the electrons will flow from hydrogen to carbon, carbon to chlorine. So finally, what happened? The electron density surrounding this hydrogen is reduced. You can see the electron density is reduced. So it should be like this way. So all the electron density are moving towards carbon. Automatically, this proton is lacking the electron density. But finally, this is not protected. So it's called as de-shielded. That's what I said. Any proton which are close to the electronegative element or which are close to the unsaturation, basically they are what is de-shielded. So the NMR chart also same. Also I told nothing but, and if you take the NMR chart like this is the place where we have TMS and highly shielded protons appear toward at upfield, lower delta value, and de-shielded proton appear at downfielded. So this very important question here, Jeep, nothing but they'll ask you that if they'll ask this lower and shielding. So if the delta value is low, it's called as shielded. The delta value is high, it's called what is the de-shielded. Sometimes they give value like 3, 4 value they give. They'll ask you to arrange in the shielding order or de-shielding order. Higher the delta value is the de-shielding, and lower the delta value is what is the shielding. This you want to remember. One example for the chemical shift, how this electronegativity is going to affect your the chemical shift value of the proton. See, let us take this methane. So methane, all protons are equivalent. That is expected to the signal is expected to appear at 1 ppm. Now I removed one hydrogen. I introduced iodine. So iodine is an electronegative element. It's 2.2. Instead of iodine, I introduced bromine. It's 2.7. Instead of bromine, introduced Cl. It's 3.1. Instead of Cl, it is fluorine. It is 4.3. So here you can see that, and the fluorine is highly electronegative than chlorine. Chlorine is more electronegative than bromine. Bromine is more electronegative than iodine. So as the electronegativity increases, you can see that the value also increasing. So from 1 ppm become the 4.3 ppm. It indicates the de-shielding effect. So that's why the electronegativity increases. It induces what is it? De-shielding. So by saying the other way, as alkyl group increases opposite, so this halogens are electron withdrawing nature, so that induced de-shielding. Whereas in go for alkyl group, so here you just see we have CH2H one alkyl group, here two alkyl group, three alkyl group. As number of alkyl groups are increasing, is electron releasing nature. Automatically, electron releasing nature means actually the hydrogen will have more amount of electron density. So we have more amount of electron density, automatically the shielding effect increases. So that what happens, you just see when one alkyl group is 0.9 ppm, it is 1.3 ppm, you see, it's moving towards this side. So it's increasing chemical shift. And you can see here water in CdCl3, CS3 in Cl3. This is to the value. And it's same repeated chart, I think so. It's repeating. I think this slide is repeating. I think that's what it's repeating. Okay. The various chemical shift value for different functional groups. And if you don't understand, if you feel confusion on this particular chart, you can follow this chart also. Very simple. You can say TMS and this alkane, it's amine and alcohol range, it's water. You can see it's very, very important. They asked me examination, water, where it appears thing. And amides, it's aromatic regions, and this aldehyde, carboxyl. So this indicate this value you have to see. If it is amide, you just see 8 to 6. Aldehyde, it's around 10 plus 11 to around 9. Like in case of alkane, it's 0 to 2. So likewise, you can have it. So it's very simple. See, it's alkane, nitrogen, oxygen, and next is only the electronegative elements are introduced here. Nitrogen, oxygen, it's shifted here. But in case of here, electronegative element as well as unsaturation, both are here. So that still the values are increased to higher data value. It means deshielding. So now the magnetically equivalent. What is this magnetically equivalent? Here, in case of your interpretation, the terminology magnetically equivalent is very important. So the magnetically equivalent means same environment. It means the magnetically equivalent proton or the protons of the same environment and gives same NMR signal. So here the equivalent protons, for example methane, if you take this chemical structure and we have four protons, all protons are attached to carbon. I mean, the environment for all the four protons are same. So here, all protons are called as equivalent proton. When come for acetaldehyde, these three protons are attached to carbon, and this proton is attached to carbon, but here carbon is different. This carbon is different. This is a carbonyl carbon. Carbon involved a double bond. So even though it is attached to the carbon, and you cannot consider this carbon both are same, because the highly electropositive carbon atom, it is less electropositive carbon atom. So here this photon and so this photon, they are not equivalent. They are non-equivalent photons. This photon is different and these three photons are different. That's why here they are equivalent photon, they are non-equivalent photon. So this all three photon gives one same signal, and here also this all three photon gives same signal, and this is different signal. Some non-equivalent protons here. See here, one more example here. If you take this C, this hydrogen A, this proton A attached to this carbon, this proton attached to this carbon, this proton attached to the carbon. But still, these all three protons are not equivalent. The reason is, if I see, this particular proton is having environment of B proton, A proton, but this proton having environment of benzene and C proton, and this proton environment is benzene and C proton. So all three are different, and these all three protons are non-equivalent proton. The same way in this molecule, OH is different, this H is different, this is different, this is different. The reason is here, you know, this proton and this proton different, this proton, this proton different, because of OH, this carbon electron density different. As OH is attached, you cannot expect that this carbon electron density and this carbon electron density to be same. So this proton different. However, when you come for these two proton, why it is different? Because of this axial and equatorial, and where this environment is different, it's all influenced by these other groups and neighboring groups. So here in these molecules also 1, 2, 3, these all the protons are not equivalent. And the same story is repeating here. You know, this proton and these two are not same. So because this proton is an environment of Cl and hydrogen, but this proton is an environment of 2 chlorine. So this proton is surrounded by 2 chlorine. This proton is surrounded by what is 1 chlorine and 1 hydrogen. So they different environment. They are non-equivalent. So here, go for this very important part of your NMR. Most commonly, they ask in your examination, like they give some chemical structure, and they'll ask you to predict the number of signal for the given structures. So the number of NMR signals is equal to the number of different types of proton in. The protons, as I told you, the protons in different environment gives different NMR signal. So as I told you, equivalent proton gives same signal. The proton of non-equivalent proton gives different signal. When you come for this first example, it is a dimethyl ether. And dimethyl ether, this CH3 and this CH3 are both are attached to a same carbon atom. So if you consider this a HA proton, this also HA proton, both are equivalent. So the complete molecule gives only one signal. When you come for this ethyl chloride, CH3 is different, it's a methyl, CH2 is methylene, is different. So this particular proton or carbon is attached to chlorine. This carbon is attached to only carbon. So this proton environment is different, and this proton environment is different because the carbon density, carbon electron density of this CH2, the carbon electron density is different. Automatically, this proton is different. This proton different. It gives two signals. When you come for here, OCH3, this CH3 is attached to oxygen. Here also we have one CH3, but both are CH3 only, methyl group, chemically equivalent. Methyl, chemically equivalent. But this methyl group is attached to a CH2 group, but the CH2 group is attached to oxygen. The environment is different. So this is different proton, this is different proton, this is different proton. That gives three signal. But you have to be very careful when your examination paper consists of the cycloalkanes and alkenes. So when you write a structure, you don't draw like this. You just draw the complete your draw all bonds to hydrogens. So when you go for here, and accordingly, now you can conclude which proton. See, we have this proton and this proton. So this proton environment is different. So this and this are not same. This proton not same because this proton is surrounded by hydrogen and surrounded by chlorine. So accordingly, what happened? There are different signal get it. You please calculate and tell me how many signals. For this also, for example, one, two, three signal you get it right. So this proton is different, this proton is different, this proton is different. So if you calculate assets from here, you get one and two signal. It's not one two signal. This signal. And so one more example here. Dichloroethane. Here also CH2, CHCl. So this CH2, this CH2, both are equivalent. This CH2 environment is Cl and CH2. This CH2 environment is Cl and CH2. So finally, it gives only one signal. But when you come for here, you just see this side is bromine, this side is chlorine. Automatically, what happened? The electron density, because the chlorine is more electron negative than bromine, and so the CH2 is there. Those CH2 is here. The question is this CH2 is surrounded by CH2, CH2, but this CH2 attached to bromine, this is attached to bromine. So accordingly, the electron density of this carbon, the electron density of this carbon, both are not same. So finally, this molecule gives three signals, and this is give two signal. You know, OCS is different, CS is different. CH attached to carbon, and this CH attached to oxygen, so it's different. But ethanol here, as I told, is three CH2OH. OH, this carbon is attached, but this carbon is only with carbon. So all different signal is a three NMR signal, and the equivalent protons in alkene must be cis group, must be cis to the same group means C, and must be cis group means if you take this example, HA, but though it is having this other side, this is also bromine, this is also bromine. So this proton also bromine, this proton also bromine. So now this, even though I write A and B, and they're all nothing but both are cis trans to be bromine, they are equivalent. Even if you change it, the Br up, Br down, and the structures remain same. So these protons are equivalent, they give only one signal. Very important, this structure. And here the same, even when you write a trans, because this is a bromine, this is a bromine, even whatever change, if you change it, automatically what happen, and this hydrogen also, this proton also surrounded by two bromine, this also surrounded by bromine. Even if interchange are the same. So once again, this also they are equivalent to only one signal. But instead of bromine, what I do is something. But here I removed. I just added some CH3 group, OCH3 or some group. So finally, what happened now? When it is not identical, automatically cis to methoxy, I just converted to OCH3. So now these two protons are not identical because this proton is having environment of OCH3, but this is lacking OCH3, is having environment of Br. So now you get two NMR signal for this. Now let us come for spin-spin splitting. Spin-spin splitting. Often a group of hydrogen, see when you go for spin-spin splitting, nothing but when you look at your NMR spectra, you won't find this NMR spectra, proton NMR as a simple signal. Signal always sometimes complex, and it will be splitted into two or three or four. So nothing but you'll find the NMR signal as split. So that's why here the often a group of hydrogen will appear as a multiplet rather a single peak. So the multiplets are named as follows: singlet, doublet, triplet, quartet, quintet, septet, octet, nonet. So these are different name is given. Singlet means the NMR signal is appearing as only single peak. Doublet means the signal is split into two, and triplet means it is split into three. Quartet means four. Quintet means it's a five. Septet means it's a kind of seven, and octet means eight. Nonet means nine. This is the way how we name it. So this happen, how it's happening, nothing but the split up signal is because of the interaction of the nuclei with the neighboring proton. So the spin splitting is because of the neighboring effect. It's because of the neighboring effect. So when you come for the spin coupling splitting, that's why here exactly what you want to say is sometimes the signal will appear without split is called a singlet. Sometimes split as two doublet, three triplet, and it is due to spin relaxation process. It means you know the principle. The nuclei of the minus off or the nuclei of the low energy level proton absorbs radio frequency. It undergo flip. I mean change in the spin direction. So it goes up plus off. The plus off is high energy level. So this photon will never be stable. Once again, whatever the observed radio frequency, it will be released, and that release means that once it start releasing, once again the proton spin will change. It will come down to the normal state and will come down to the ground state. So that process called as relaxation process. There are two type of relaxation process. One is a spin relaxation process, another is a spin lattice relaxation process. Out of these two relaxation process, and the spin coupling is the majorly due to what is a spin relaxation process. During the spin relaxation process, the spin of this one proton is having interaction with the spin of the neighbor proton. That's why called as neighbor effect. Spin of the one proton is having interaction with the neighbor proton. It's called a spin relaxation proton. So that split intensity will be based on the following Pascal's triangle. So you should know the Pascal triangle. So I'll show you the Pascal later. The Pascal in the Pascal triangle, n is the number of neighboring proton. So here just wanted to put you for your knowledge the relaxing process. One is called a spin lattice relaxation, and where they converts the excess energy into translational, rotational, or vibrational energy of the surrounding atom or molecule. Another is a spin relaxation, which transfer the excess energy to the other magnetic nuclei in the same sample. That's what here I told you that a split up signal is due to what is spin relaxation, where the nuclei which is under relaxation transfer the energy to the neighbor nuclei, so the neighbor nuclei will undergo transitions. That's called as. So now this is called as Pascal triangle. So here the first is n nothing but number of neighboring proton, and n plus 1 means multiplicity. So next is intensity of the split. I mean the height intensity, relative intensity of the split. The name is given as multiplet, is singlet, doublet, triplet, and abbreviation is S. For example, here first let us take n is equal to 0. I mean there is no neighboring proton. So when there is no neighboring proton, what happens? The proton cannot transfer the energy to the neighboring proton. So obviously n plus 1 means 0 plus 1 is equal to 1. So relative intensity is 1 means singlet. I mean there is no split. So it appears a very simple peak. It's called a singlet. And let us think n is equal to 1. So when I come for n is equal to 1, automatically the multiplicity is 1 plus 1 is equal to 2. So the signal is split into two split. Both the split intensity will be 1:1, and this called as doublet. Symbol abbreviation we give D. The same way when you come for when you have neighbor put on 2, 2 plus 1 multiplicity, the formula n plus 1, 2 plus 1 is equal to 3. So will appear, you will see 3 split. So the intensity of all the split 3 split will be 1:2:1. I mean the middle split will have a higher intense than the other 2 split. It's triplet. So same way we have up to 8. See, the split of signal is due to the coupling of proton, neighbor proton. As I told you, the value between the split is measured as a hertz. It's called as coupling constant, which is an important factor in assigning the conformation configuration. Remember, the NMR is used to assign the stereochemistry also. So as I already used, based on Pascal triangles, the type of splitting follows n plus 1 rule, where n is a neighbor proton and n plus 1 splitter. So now you can see nothing but triplet means n is equal to 2. So when neighbor proton is 2, automatically 2 plus 1 is equal to 3 split. You can see the intensity as I told you here for just see 1:2:1. You can see here 1:1. Now let us go for here. Here you just see when your neighbor proton is 3, so 3 plus 1 4. So the intensity is 1:3:3:1. It's coded. So here the 1:3:3:1. This is the ratio, the intensity. This intensity height is called as intensity. This is the way how it's appeared. These are called as the splitter signal as a triplet, quartet, pentet, sextet, and nonet, and they're all called as spin coupling and multiplicity. So what is coupling constant? Let us take this molecule here, and this carbon only one proton. This carbon we have two proton. So we have a two signal. Let us take this particular proton. So this proton neighbor proton is two protons available. See, for this carbon it is a neighbor. Here there is no proton. Here two proton is there. As a formula, 2 plus 1 3 will come. So we have see 3 split. Okay. When you come to these two proton, A proton, neighbor is only 1. So 1 plus 1 is 2. So we have 2 split. So the each split, so the value difference between these two split or these two splits, and here also there are 6.1 hertz. So this value is called as what is a coupling constant, which is used to assign the stereochemistry. So now let us come for some splitting in the some examples, and let us come for ethanol CH3CH2OH. So as I told you, at 0 ppm is TMS, and this is at 1 we have A proton CH3, at 3 we have B proton CH2, and at 5 it's OH proton. Now you can see that its OH proton appears totally, C is the OH, right? OH proton, it's appeared totally away from TMS. So OH is highly deshielded. Out of this, see, CH3 is totally away from OH. So this CH3 proton appeared close to TMS. This is shielded. This is deshielded. And you can also see that. And when you go for this CH3, it appears 3 split, triplet, 1, 2, 3. Why it appears nothing but you can see here. For this proton, neighbor is this CH2. So this CH2, 2 plus 1 3. That's why it's triplet. When you come for this CH2, neighbor is CH3. Neighbor is CH3. 3 plus 1 is equal to 4. That's why appears 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Usually the OH proton that do not involve any splitting because it's highly de-shielded. As the de-shielding effect is increasing, and these protons are shielded proton, this is de-shielded proton, and obviously in a high resolution instrument you can find a split for OH also, depends on this environment. But it is a normal NMR instrument, you won't find split for oxygen. So now equivalent proton do not couple. So here I showed methyl chloride, and these all equivalent proton, they do not appear. They do not split into a singlet, doublet, or triplet. All together gives only one signal. Same here also. These two proton. See, when you go for this Cl is a Cl is a. This proton, both are equivalent. So all four proton together they use only one signal. And now we can for here in case of substituted compounds, and you just see here HA, HB depends on this environment. They are not same carbon, and they are not equivalent. Next, this proton, they are in the different carbon. So this carbon environment is different, this carbon environment different, and they are also not equivalent. Next is splitting is not generally observed between protons separated by more than 3 bonds. That is also very important rule here. When a proton is separated by more than 3 bonds, you cannot expect any split. For example, here, this proton is there, this proton is there, and they are separated by 4 bonds. How are you going to count the bonds? 1, 2, 3, 4. Then you cannot expect any coupling for these two proton, so you won't find any splitting for this. Same way here, ethyl methyl ether. And this proton, they are separated by 1, 2, 3, 4 bonds. So even there is no coupling between this proton and this proton. But you will find coupling between these two protons. Sorry, this proton and this proton. This and this proton you will find coupling. The same way you can find coupling for this proton and this proton. The CH3 will undergo split because of this proton. This undergo because of split because of this proton. But this proton will never undergo split because of this proton or this proton. And come for this coupling constants. There are different types of stereo elements. Like when you go for alkane, usually the coupling constant 6 to 8 hertz, and this is a kind of cis configuration. Both hydrogen on same side, it's 6 to 15 hertz. If it is a trans, 11 to 15 hertz. This called as geminal, okay, vicinal proton and vicinal proton, kind of vicinal proton. It's 0 to 5 hertz. It's ortho coupling. It's always 7 to 10 proton. Meta coupling 2 to 3 proton. Para coupling is 1 to 8 proton. You can see here these three structure. As the distance increases, the coupling is decreasing. So here it is when it is orthoproton 7 to 10 hertz. When you come for meta, it's 2 to 5 hertz, and para it's 0 to 1 hertz. So next is your next is a mass spectroscopy, and let me have a break for 5 minutes. Then I'll continue, please. Hello, welcome back. So I will start with the mass spectroscopy. So in this mass spectroscopy session, so I'll be dealing only about the fundamental here. And when you come for mass spectroscopy, it's the most important analytical technique used to find out the molecular weight. It used to identify the unknown compounds with a sample, determine the isotope ratio. It is used to elucidate the structure and study of a different isomer. These are the four major applications of mass spectrometry. So many of us, when you read it, we always confine with only the first application, that is find out the molecular weight. But not only this molecular weight, and we also try to identify the unknown compounds within a sample, determine the isotope ratio, elucidate the structure and study of different isomers. So this mass spectrometry involves the conversion of the neutral molecule into gaseous atom with or without fragmentations. Then the converted neutral molecule into gaseous atom. So these gaseous ions, which are then characterized by their mass to charge ratio that we call as m by z and percentage relative abundance. The conversion of neutral gas molecule to positive charge molecule is called as ionization process. It means what they want to say is, in case of mass spectrometry, the neutral molecules are not analyzed. The neutral molecule has to be converted into positively charged ion. That positively converted ion only the mass spectrometer can detect and can measure. So the conversion of the neutral gas molecule into positively charged molecule is called as ionization process. So it is attained by different ionization techniques. And here you can see the flow chart. The first one is M, and generally by means of ionization techniques, now we pass a electron beam. So it's called as electron impact ionization. This electron beam, what happen? One electron go and impact with the molecule and it remove one more electron that is converted into radical cation. This is called as ionization. So the neutral molecule is converted into positively charged species. You know, this radical cation, this is the energy is very high when compared to the neutral molecule. It never be stable. Further, it get break into small species. Is called as cation and radical. So this is called as fragmentations. So remember, so now this is called as molecule. The radical cation is called as molecular ion. So here the molecular weight of molecule and molecular will be same. Molecule and molecular weight will be same. So if you measure the molecular weight, if you are able to measure the mass per charge ratio, but here for molecule we call it as molecular weight. In molecular ion we call it as mass to charge ratio. So the mass to charge ratio and molecular weight of molecule were the same. So these ions are called fragmentation. So mass spectrometry, these two terms are very important. I mean, conversion of a neutral molecule into positively charged species, nothing but it's molecular ion. Then the molecular ion depends on the stability, depends on the chemical nature, further get break into small species fragments is called as fragmentations. So there are different types of ionization process in the mass spectrometry. One is called as electron impact ionizations, where we use minus 70 electron volt to ionize. Out of all ionization process, electron impact ionization process alone is called as hard ionization process. When you come for chemical ionization, and we use reagent gas. The example of reagent gas are methane and ammonia. Next, we also have fast atom bombardment ionizations, and this is more commonly used for soft molecule. It is based on the collision between the high velocity xenon and argon gases molecule. Next is electrospray ionization. It is based on the voltage at spray nozzles used for the polar molecule in LCMS. Remember, the ESI is used in LCMS. Even Fab also used in LCMS. And in advancement, we also have atomic pressure chemical ionization, and which is more commonly used for non-polar molecule. You just see the electrospray ionizations more commonly we use for polar molecule, and atomic pressure chemical ionization we use it for non-polar molecule in LCMS. Next, the matrix assisted laser disruption ionization, which is based on this sample matrix, and here the sample is mixed with urea nicotinic acid, nothing but it's a matrix. Then we try to irradiate a laser. So once, because of laser, the sample or molecule will get ionized into positively charged. Then the positively charged ion will undergo disruption from the matrix. That's why called as matrix assisted laser disruption ionization. Above all, except this electron impact first ionization, all other ionizations are called as soft ionization process. It means except EI, you will find M plus 1. I mean, the quasi-molecular ion is very common in all techniques except electron impact ionization. So this is a typical appearance of a mass spectrum, original mass spectrum. But when you come for your data, if you go for a textbook or if you send your sample for obtaining mass spectra, this is spectrum you get it. It is a bar graph of mass spectrum, and where you find so many noise in the mass spectrum, those noise are removed and made it cleaned. It's called as cleaned mass spectrum. So this is the axis where m by z, mass to charge ratio. The mass to charge ratio nothing but this is equivalent to molecular weight, and this height indicate the intensity of the percentage relative abundance. So the higher the height is the highest abundance. I mean, the particular molecule or particular fragment is most stable. So now let us come for different peaks in the mass spectrum. Different peaks in the mass spectrum, and we have molecular ion, which is called as parent peak, and next is base peak, next is fragment peaks, next is isotope peaks, next is metastable ion peak. So totally we have five different type of molecular ion, sorry, five different types of peak we observe in a mass spectrum. So this in this mass spectrum, each and everyone is called as peaks. Each and everyone is called as what is it? Peaks. So here in case of molecular ion peak, it's a parent peak, and this peak will have the highest m by z value. Now let us compare here. So out of this, now if you take this is a peak with the highest m by z value. So you have to consider this peak is the molecular ion peak. The value is not mentioned, but still you have to consider this is the peak, the molecular ion peak, and which has the highest m by e value. It is not necessary that the parent peak should have a high intensity. Only that peak or a small or large peak which has highest m by z value that is equal to molecular weight of the compound. So now the this particular peak value may be around 500 or something. This is the molecular weight of the compound. Next is base peak, and base peak nothing but it is the peak with the highest intensity 100%. So here if you go for here, this may be the peak. If the y-axis always percentage relative abundance. So this peak is the one, the highest peak equivalent to 100%. This peak is highest to equivalent to 100%. So this peak may be one of the fragment from this particular molecular ion peak. So this is called as base peak. Next is fragment peak. All the peaks which are lower m by e or m by z value than molecular ion peak, they are called as fragment peak. See, if you see this is your molecular ion peak, all the peaks you see here, smaller or taller, whatever may be the whichever may be the peaks you find 93, 137, 179, 225, 381, all are coming under fragment peak. So remember, the base peak may be one of the fragment ion peak, sometime base peak, sometime base peak also a molecular ion peak. It's all depends upon the chemical structure. Next is isotope peak. So isotope peak, I think, but it's called as M plus 1 and M plus 2 peak, and it should not be confused with the quasi-molecular ion peak. The quasi-molecular ion peak is because of M plus H. So here, if you see a particular anything, you see this is 381 is it. Out of 310, nearby you can see a small peak is over here, or out of this peak you can find small peaks over here. So these small peaks are called as M plus 1, M plus 2 because of isotope. The reason is, for example, if carbon is 12, it's M. If carbon become 13, that plus M plus 1. If oxygen is 16, M. If oxygen is 18, become M plus 2. So accordingly, there is a possibility for isotope peak. Next, when you come for metastable ion peak, it is one of the very important aspects of your mass spectrometry. Sometimes they ask in your examination. So remember, these metastable ion peaks uh, are M by Z value with a decimal value, and usually that particular M value will be decimal means 36.4, like 71.3, like it will be decimal. So the metastable ion peak or generally it is their normal peak, their abnormal peak. It is due to the abnormal translational energy of ion which has ionized at analyzer instead of ion chamber. Remember, in mass spectrometer, there is only two major components instrument. One is called as ionization chamber. As I told you, different type of ionization technique, where the ionization chamber convert a neutral molecule into molecular ion and fragments. The analyzer is a part of the mass spectrometer that separates the formed ions according to the value of M mass to charge ratio, nothing but M by Z value. So here what happened, for normally any molecule, the ionization to take place only at ionization chamber. But in case of metastable ion, this particular peaks, the ions are formed in analyzer instead at ionization chamber. So there is a formula also there. You have to remember it to calculate what is the metastable ion. See, for example, M star is generally we mention for metastable peak is equal to M2 whole square by M1. So for example, this one ion C5H1 ion, the M by Z value is 69. It is producing C3H541 plus C2H4 neutral molecule. So this is called as M1. This is called as M2. So how to calculate for these transitions? Conversion of this M by Z value of 69 is converted into 41. How we are going to calculate metastable ion here? You can see that this 41 whole square by 69, 24.36. Okay, it is absorbed at 24.4. So this is called as metastable ion. Next, when you come for this, and we have different types of rules we have in mass spectrometry, and I'll be discussing about the rule one by one. And these rules are very important in your mass spectrometry, and you have to remember it. And you may have questions based on these rules. And what is this nitrogen rule? So these nitrogen rules states that the organic molecule that contains hydrogen, carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, silicon, phosphorus, sulfur, halogens have odd nominal mass if they have odd number of nitrogen atom, or an even mass if they have an even number of nitrogen atom present. So this is the paragraph given in textbook. Obviously you will not understand. You will not understand, you forget about it. Now you look at the table now, you will understand. So now, if your molecular weight is even, definitely the nitrogen may be present, nitrogen may not be present. If the nitrogen is present, the nitrogen might be in even number or no nitrogen, 0. Next, if your molecular weight is odd, the molecule contains nitrogen, so the number of nitrogen in the molecule is only odd number. For example, I am telling you molecular weight of 183. 183 is an odd number. So when 183 is an odd number, definitely you can say this molecule is a nitrogenous compound because the molecular weight is odd. Definitely nitrogenous compound in the molecular formula, nitrogen is must. But once again, still you can define how many nitrogen will be there in the particular molecular formula. It is definitely odd number. Maybe 1 nitrogen or 3 nitrogen or 5 nitrogen. Next, before when you come for the even molecular weight, for example, let us take water. Water is H2O 18. It's a even. There is no nitrogen. That's why here I written may not be present. Or urea, NH2CO NH2. The molecular weight is 60. The number of nitrogen is even. So here, a simple example, if your molecular weight is even, there is even number of nitrogen. If your molecular weight is odd, there is odd number of nitrogen. That way, if only first case you have to add, if your molecular weight is even, you have to add one more. The nitrogen may be even number or no nitrogen. If your molecular weight is odd, the nitrogen is only odd. That's what is called as nitrogen rule. Next rule is ring equivalence plus double bond equivalence or index of hydrogen deficiency. So here what is the meaning is, and this formula is used to predict the number of rings or number of double bond in the molecular formula. So here, that's why here number of rings plus pi bond is equal to u c minus h by 2 minus x by 2 plus n by 2 plus 1. So for example, you take this carbon dioxide. For carbon dioxide, if you calculate, C is 1, remaining all 0. Remaining all is 0, H0, X0, N0. So 1 plus 1 is equal to 2. The U value is 2. That's why it indicates the presence of two double bond in the structure. The carbon dioxide, you can write like this, C double bond O, double bond O. Next, let us come for water. In water, carbon 0. Hydrogen is 2. So 2 by 2, it is minus 1. So remaining all 0. Minus 1 plus 1, 0. So the water molecule, no double bond or no ring. Let us go for benzene, C6H6. So here 6 will be there, and it's a 3 by 2. 3 by 2. 6 hydrogen is there, 3. So 6 minus 3, 3 is there, 0, 0. So here 6 minus 3 plus 1. So automatically the total value, if you calculate for benzene, the formula 4 you get. That's why in benzene, there is one ring and 3 double bonds. So in benzene you write, you put a one ring sister, plus inside you write 3 double bond. That's why called as 3 double bonds, 1 ring. It's called as ring equivalence plus double bond equivalence or index of hydrogen deficiency. Next is the even electron rule. The even electron rules states that ion with an even number of electrons, cations, but not radical ions, tend to form even electron fragment ions, and whereas the odd electrons or radical ions forms odd electrons ions or even electron ions. So if you read it, you don't understand anything. So here what they want to say, even electron species, I mean if any fragment with the even electron species, it will fragment to even electron cation and neutral molecule. That's it. It will not form two odd electron species. It means even electron species gives only even electron cation. That's it. The same way, odd electron radicals forms odd electron ions or odd even electron ions. That can form both. That odd electron radical ions can form odd electron ions as well as even electron ions. But these even electron species tend to fragment into another even electron cation and neutral molecule rather than two odd electron species. The next is this rule of 13. The rule of 13 is where you get this rule of 13. So this rule of 13 is used for tabulating the possible chemical formula for a given molecular mass. So where you get the 13, nothing but it is based on the molecular formula construction unit or the structure construction unit hydrocarbon CH. If you take CH unit, carbon is 12, hydrogen is 1, so 12 plus 1 is equal to 13. So that 13 only called as rule of 13. So here, if the molecular weight of the molecule is m, then the number of possible CH unit in the n and n, so you can divide it. Same like mathematical dividing how you did in our olden days without calculator. So this you have to do without calculator. So m by 13. So is equal to n plus r. You will get is m by 13 is equal to n plus r by 13. So accordingly, now the base formula for the molecule is CnHn plus R. So this I'll show you how to do it. For example, if your molecular weight is 133, how to make formula? Okay, so 133 divided by 13. If you go for here, how much you'll get? How many times n is equal to 10? So 10 threes are, so 10 13s are 130, and remaining r is how much is there? Is equal to 3. So now we go for the n is equal to 10 and r is equal to 3. Now you can go for the formula according to this, and CnHn plus r. So the formula is C10H n plus 13. So the molecular formula is like C10 H13. So this is the way how you're going to do the formula. So the same way, for example, I have one like this is the way how you're going to construct the formula. So next is Stevenson rule. So what is this Stevenson rule? If two fragments are in competition to produce a cation, the fragment with the lowest ionization energy will be formed more frequently. It means longest chain will cleave as radicals. So here, according to the Stevenson rule, if two fragments are in the competition to produce a cation, so obviously the fragment with the lowest ionization energy will form more frequently. I mean, it means the longest chain will cleave as radical. So there are different types of rules are there, like fragmentation rule. So that fragmentation rule it's available on the textbook that you can go through. It's not a problem. But only thing is that remember, especially this is very important. These rules from where I am saying is this rule is very important. So when you come for nitrogen rule, I'll go for another exercise for nitrogen rule. So now let us take 143. What you're right, the molecular weight is 143. Definitely it is a nitrogen compound. So it means the number of nitrogen will be definitely it is 1, 3 or 5. So how you are going to construct a formula for this particular molecular weight? Definitely CX HY NZ. So Z is equal to 1, 3, 5, etc. Okay, this is a way how you are going to propose the based on the molecular weight. What will be the formula? Okay, now I'll go for the molecular weight of 160. So it is even. There are two formula possible: CX and HY. CX HY. It means no nitrogen. No nitrogen. Or there is other formula possible: CX HY and CX HY and NZ. Here NZ. So Z is must to be 246. So now this way here, based on the molecular weight, if it is odd, the possible formula is CXHYNZ. Here the nitrogen is 135 possible must, but when it is a 160, the even number of molecular weight, definitely this particular formula, there are two possible formula. One is without nitrogen, another is with nitrogen. Okay. So next slide, how you are going to introduce your oxygen atom, for example, and I have the formula of 162. No, I have, for example, C C3 H4 H8 O. Now the question is it correct or not? Question is the case. How you are going to find out? This simply I wrote C8H8O. Whether this formula is correct or incorrect, how you are going to define it? Very simple formula. You go for this saying for to find out that. Yes. So here, what if any formula is there? If the formula correct or incorrect, you can check with the same formula. C8, C3, H8O, same formula, you put the value here. If you get decimal value, for this particular formula, your formula is wrong. So here, accordingly, so here what I'll do is, I'll try to correct it, see, as for the formula. So C3, so 3 minus H8 means 8 by 2 minus 0 plus 1. So 3 minus 4 plus 1. So finally it becomes 0. So it means the formula is correct. The formula is correct. There is no double bond. Obviously, the molecular formula may be like CH3, 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 CH2, O, C, O, CH3. Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, that's why here. Okay, so now I'll go for the formula. For example, C6H5. So definitely you'll get a decimal. If you apply this, you'll get a decimal like 6 minus 5 by 2 and minus 0 plus 1. So here you get 6 minus 2.5 plus 1. So the value what you're going to get, nothing but it is almost like a decimal. It's 7 minus 4.5 something you get 4.7, yes, 4.5 is decimal. So if you get decimal value for this formula, it means the molecular formula is wrong. Wrong. So these are the major application case of your mass spectrometry, and how we can effectively use this formula predicting, and this formula how. So this formula not only used to find out number of rings and number of pi bonds, it is also used to find out whether the formula is correct or incorrect. And this nitrogen rule, and based on that you can assign the, like as I told you here, you can assign the formula also, like if 140 is nitrogen compound, how you can assign your formula CXHY nitrogen, if it is even CXHY or CXHY nitrogen. This is the way how you can define, you can do it. So these are about your mass spectrometry, the fundamental things I have given. And if you have any queries, you can post it to my email. I'll respond when I'm free. And thank you very much, one and all.